Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. You have just clicked on maybe the rarest video that I have ever uploaded on this channel. Ever. I have made content about Magnus Carlsen like you wouldn't imagine. Hikaru Nakamura, Gukesh, other top players, low elo, high elo, computer level chess, bots, drama, etc. But 1 year ago, I made a video called 30 Brilliant Moves in a Row. And in that video, two people had played against each other in a tournament, and their names were Mikola Bortnik and Ling Shizhu. And they're back. The two of them played another game, and I'm going to turn it into a YouTube video because it was absolute cinema. If you haven't seen that video yet, go watch that game. That game was so crazy. And they've done it again. How rare is it that the same two people manage to play in a tournament and I make a video about it, and they're outside of the top elite players? Obviously, I cover all the Grandmaster games and they play each other all the time. This has never happened before on this channel in 6 years of making content. And now you're here, you're witnessing it. This is history. This is history. A brilliant rematch, a rematch for the ages. This game was bananas. Bananas. So, Mikola opens with d4. Now, he is a d4 player. In that previous game, even if you've watched it already, you should go back and watch that game, all right? Because there's no way you remember it. In that game, he played e4. So this time he plays d4. Lingxi plays knight f6. The most aggressive, dynamic opening you can play with the black pieces is, of course, very good. Not the England Gambit, the King's Indian. Very vast, very deep, like an ocean of a chess opening. Mikola plays knight to c3. Black can, of course, play d5 as well. You can go for a Grunfeld defense, but Lingxi plays bishop g7, e4, d6. And now white has a million things to choose from. Like, really, there are so many variations. Let me put my oatmeal over here. Shout out, by the way, to those of you that have pre-ordered this signed. Shout out to all of you. Bishop 2e2 is one of the lines. The historic main line is knight f3, bishop e2 castles. I also have a course on the King's Indian defense, which is very nice opening. But Mikola plays a line that I like a lot. He plays bishop e2, and he plays what's called the double bishop variation. It's also called the semi-Averbach, according to chess.com, after Averbach, the grandmaster. But bishop e2, bishop e3, is the line chosen here. There are a lot of lines here. Black can play e5, c5, knight a6, knight d7, c6. I mean, a million different things. Lingxi plays a move I've never seen before, which is the move a5. But basically, you can play pawn to a5 at any moment in this opening. The idea can be to play knight to a6, and then e5, and then win control of that square, and then the knight would go there, and white can't play b4. So a5 is a really long-term planning type of move. Also, sometimes you can even play a4 and a3. But anyway, Mikola now plays h3. Kind of a waiting move. Maybe you want to go knight f3. Clearly with this, you also have bad intentions of playing g4, f4. Mikola is a very creative, attacking, dynamic player, and this game gets attacking and dynamic within 10 moves. So this is white's 7th move. Lingxi continues with knight to a6. He spent 10 minutes on that move. He got locked in the toilet. No, I don't know. Maybe he was just evaluating the position. Knight to f3. And now black plays this move e5. So black has finished his plan, right? White now has a choice. White could take, but that obviously opens up the position. You can't really take twice with white because you would be opening up this bishop and you don't really want to do that. If you want to attack in chess, you need to close the center. Fun fact. You cannot really attack in chess if the center is wide open. It's going to be really difficult. So you generally need to lock the center and then go for an attack against your opponent. Lingxi plays knight h5. Very nice move. Two ideas of this move. Number one, f5. Number two, knight to f4. Bringing the pawn to f5 is a very key piece of the King's Indian defense, and putting the knight on f4 honestly can even work in a position like this. Like even here, Lingxi can already play knight f4. According to the computer, he already has a slightly better position. He can choose between f5 and knight f4. The problem is you don't get both. It's very rare you get away with both of these moves because white will have something to say. He plays f5. I think knight f4 was a little bit better. And you might be wondering, doesn't that just lose a pawn to takes, takes, takes? Yes, but this bishop coming alive is absolutely worth it. And black is actually better despite being a pawn down, which is quite fascinating, right? Very instructive example of how this bishop is kind of passive. These knights don't really have a lot of forward mobility. It's going to be black kind of controlling the game from here. Anyway, f5 is the move chosen. Pawn takes, pawn takes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take one final look at this game because we're not going back from here. We are not going back. I think both of these boys were in a little bit of collusion. They both know that they participated in a 5 million viewed YouTube video. By no choosing of their own, of course. That I put them there. But they had to put on a banger game. Maybe they spoke before the game. They were like, hey, let's just play the craziest game ever. I don't think they did that. I think it just kind of comes naturally from both of their playing styles, because in this position, Mykola Bortnik spent 14 and a half minutes and played G4. Oh yeah, here we go. G4. Now that is just a pawn sacrifice. The idea is pawn takes, bishop takes G4. But the thing is, black can't do this. Black cannot open this. He cannot lose the F and G pawns because it's actually not an attack on white. White is going to go here. And then the second that you trade and you come here, I'm just going to take everything, put my knight on E6. I'm going to long castle. I'm going to play queen H5, queen D3. It's just going to be mate. Black's king is actually way too weak in this position. So G4, Lingxi just plays knight F4. He's not in the business of opening the position. You need to get rid of this. So Mykola does, takes. And now white has, again, a lot of options here. A lot of options. He can't take. He can't take because pawn takes, and then obviously you're in a lot of trouble here. You don't really want to take this either. This move only helps black develop a piece. Yeah, you get rook G1, but you have no follow-up. There is no threat. So white needs to make a timely move in this position. One of those moves, he could long castle right away. He could do that. The move that Mykola chooses, somehow this man always finds a way to make the most interesting move in a position. I don't understand. Mykola in this position is like, so, black wants to open the position. Black would love if both pawns were gone, because then the rook would be strong, the bishop would be active. What if I go G5? Now, computer is debating this move. It's debating whether it likes this move or not. Right? But basically the idea is black is not going to activate either piece. Black is now walled in by his own pawns. And white, meanwhile, can go for some sort of attack on this side of the board. Lingxi plays A4. Okay? A4 is clearly designed to go A3. Soften up this diagonal because he anticipates that Mykola is going to go over here. Mykola shuts that down, plays A3. Very, very provocative move. Black is now going to put the rook on the E file and try to get his knight in the game where it can go to B3, forking the queen and the rook, or to E4. Very wild game. Very imbalanced position. Lingxi plays rook to E8, which is a very reasonable move. He also could have went knight C5. You know what the computer wants black to play here? This is how you know you are deep in the forest of the variations. It wants knight C5, which is at least understandable, and then it wants black to play rook A6. And the idea of rook A6 is just to put the rook on B6. Just put the rook on B6 and apply pressure. There is nothing you're going to gain. Right? It just wants to do this first. Lingxi plays rook E8 because what could be more natural than lining up the rook against the king? Any way the king castles, there's going to be problems. Yeah. Mykola knows that. Which is why in this position, he plays king F1. He doesn't castle. He doesn't castle. Actually, the king is completely safe on F1. It doesn't need to go to the traditional square here. It doesn't need to go here. It just stands right on F1. And it is blocked by 4 different pieces. It is wearing the world's biggest hat. It's just wearing a hat. The king's just wearing a hat. Nobody's going to get to the king. Not from this diagonal, not from here, not from straight down. The king is safe. And this rook, which would have had to go to F1, is now going to escort the H-pawn up the board where white actually can still attack. White can still attack. White can go here and here and here and here and get in. So Lingxi brings his knight. Mykola now is like, all right, if I'm going to attack this guy and end up in another YouTube video, I need to bring all my pieces. All of my pieces need to come to join the party, right? Before I go for H4, I need to play rook E1. I get out of knight to B3 fork. The rook is here, replacing where my king was. King's just chilling. King's absolutely safe. That is actually the least of the concerns in the position. So now Lingxi doesn't really have much of a follow-up here. He can continue to improve his position. Bishop D7, just kind of getting the bishop sort of out, and then maybe the queen. C6 is possible to try to attack the center. Plays a very natural move as far as I'm concerned. Knight to E4. Knight E4 is a mistake. It was a natural move. He obviously wanted his F-pawn taken. Those doubled pawns are not doing black much good. They're kind of in the way. But if you lose one of the pawns, you know, then we're going to activate the bishop. We're going to get all the pieces going. But Mykola takes on f4. So now white has an extra pawn. And for this move, black can win the pawn back. He can go knight takes and bishop takes, etc., and then win the pawn back and then proceed with the game. You can also play bishop to d7, bring out some more pieces, etc. But Lingxi takes the knight, and then he takes his pawn. Now, a normal person in this position sees that his rook is hanging. And he moves his rook. Duh. And some of you might even go, hey, can't you move your rook and attack the bishop? Well, yeah, but then there is a fork, so you want to be a little careful. So, maybe you play rook b1. Rook b1's a nice move. Stops bishop b2. Pressures this pawn so the bishop can't move. And then you play bishop d3. Here, you improve your position. Chill game. Mikola is not normal. Bishop c3 arrives on the board. And I told you, these boys, they are back in a Gotham video, the only two people that have ever played each other in 2 tournament games outside of the world's elite players and are back. They are back. I don't think I'm making a mistake. Anyway, Mikola thought for 30 seconds in this position out of 51 minutes. And this absolute lunatic went g6. He sacrificed his rook. Pawn to g6. Trying to get an attack on the black king. Now, I think it's fair to say that if the bishop takes the rook, pawn takes h7 is going to happen, and the g and h pawns have been cleared, so the black king is obviously looking quite, endangered here. But if this pawn was taken, after queen h6, this is very, very scary. It's nearly lost. There is a potential variation that could have occurred here. King f7, knight g5 check, king e7. You don't have a discovered attack by moving the bishop because your rook is actually hanging. And then here, I can play queen here, and the king just goes to f8 and actually is safe. Or I can play knight h7. And then there's queen g7 threatening a queen trade, which obviously would benefit, the side that's trying to defend. So, g6. Lingxi thinks and plays bishop takes. I think at this point, Lingxi was like, I think I'm going to end up in another YouTube video. I think when g6 appeared, he was like, yo. So bishop takes e1 on the board, and this is where the game gets even more ridiculous, because g takes h7, king h8. Now, again, a normal person here probably picks up this bishop. You're looking at this position, you're like, okay, so maybe knight to g5, knight to f7, maybe rook g1. Okay, I can give this check, but then the king is going to take. Actually, you have to give this check. Because you force the king to take your pawn. You guys have to understand, the king's not taking the pawn because he would walk directly into a knight attack. This move with a tempo, winning time against the king. And then anywhere the king moves, there's rook g1, and that's it. The king has nothing protecting him anymore. The knight moves, the queen gets in, it's mate. You even have the bishop coming. So, by playing queen d4 check, you force the king to take the pawn. We don't take the bishop. Mikola is down a full rook, but he plays rook g1, and that is the first checkmate threat of the game. That is the first checkmate threat of the game. And if you actually look at this position, it looks completely lost. It looks completely and totally lost. Because if black plays rook g8, knight g5 check anyway. Rook takes g5, queen h4 check. And that's it. King here, bishop h5, you can no longer defend the rook. Unbelievable. Mikola is going to win this game. And now, you might be wondering, why is it 0-0-0? Well, Lingxi has a move. He has one move that saves the game. He's about to be flattened with a knockout punch, which is kind of crazy because Mikola's like a 30-year-old man and Lingxi's 12. But, whatever. In chess, you're allowed to beat up 12-year-olds with your fists and the chess pieces. Lingxi finds the only move in the position, bishop c3! The bishop resurrecting itself from death and covering checkmate. And if you just take this bishop, obviously what else could you do? This is not mate, the queen takes. What else could you possibly do here? If you take this, black is better because now black has rook g8. You might be like, Levy, what are you talking about? Didn't you just say that? Yeah, but when the queen went there, it can no longer go to h4. It can't go to h3. So this no longer works. The queen cannot participate in the attack. Bishop c3, Lingxi probably is like, yo, I'm winning. Like he fell for my trap. No. Mikola had the whole thing planned out. He gives a check with his rook instead. The rook must arrive on that square. Why? Why does the rook have to arrive on that square? Black is just going to go here. Now white can take. But what's the difference? The difference is that by going into this sequence, you force black to play rook to g8. You force black to play rook to g8, and the king is moved up, right? The king moved up to h6, and that's very important because now the king, by going up to h6, is susceptible to a check. On h7, he was only susceptible to that check. Everything in the position works. Rook g8, and now Mikola here, the best move is so absurd. He plays a very natural move. Rook takes and queen takes. He can also play pawn to h4, apparently. Unless I'm mixing this up. Not in this particular position. Pawn to h4, there's rook takes rook. Wait, I'm mixing something up. Hold on. Hold on a minute. Maybe he needed to play rook g5, not h4. Rook g5 with the idea to play h4. The idea to play h4. Rook g5. What is rook g5? Rook takes g5. Knight g5. If king takes, queen g7, king f4, queen g3, and this is mate. So he can put the rook on g5 in this position, which is just crazy. And if queen takes, like this, there's check here, and you could hunt the king around, and then h4. This is a key idea in the variation. h4 attacks the queen, and if the queen goes for a trade, there's this mate. So queen c3, rook g8. Mikola plays rook takes g8, queen takes g8, queen f6, queen g6 blocks. Mikola is down a rook for a knight. So any endgame for white is going to be losing. It's going to be losing. You got to win this game with a vicious attack against the king. Mikola doesn't have a lot left. But this man, it just has this ability to maximize the effectiveness of every piece, to utilize everything that he has, right? Worst comes to worst in this position, white has a draw. White can go check, here, and check. And the game will end with perpetual because king h5 is mate in 1, so this would be a draw. But Mikola's not going to make a draw. So he goes check queen h7. He's like, hey, how do I play a move that maintains the tension? Queen d8. Queen d8 is a great move because not only does it threaten checkmate and force a response from black, who, for the record, has not moved a rook and a bishop in 29 turns. I don't know how it's possible to be playing a game and just not move 2 pieces, but Mikola finds a way to make that happen. And then he's also threatening to eat some pawns if the black queen moves. So Lingxi plays queen g6. Queen g7 is a better move. It's better to go queen g7. Very tough to defend this position. He goes queen g6 instead. Not really sure what he was trying to cover here versus something else. And now Mikola plays just an utterly heinous move. I can't even believe he played the move that he played. Maybe Lingxi thought that after queen g7 there was this, and some sort of knight sacrifice. Or maybe like, I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to put his king on g6. So that's why he went queen here so he can put his king here. So first of all, the best move in the position according to the computer here is c5. And the point of c5 is very simple. If takes, the knight gains access to a square and you win because you infiltrate. But black doesn't have to take. But the thing is, if black doesn't take, if like f4 is played, check, somewhere the queen moves, and you win the pawn. So black just doesn't have a move. If you play something like rook b8, I take, queen, not queen e8, queen h8, queen h7, and then I'm always going to be winning this pawn. Anyway. The move Mikola chooses in this game is not c5. This man goes here. This is so ridiculous. Knight g5. You get hit with knight g5 when you're playing black. You're like, bro, ain't no way. And this position is actually holdable for black. The idea of knight to g5 is if black does nothing, this is game over because there's king takes knight, h4, mate. If you do take the knight, which you do have to do, it's that same position that I told you. Queen h8, king here, and then this move pawn to h4. And Lingxi had to see this position and spot the only defensive move, bishop d7, which is not even the end of the story, because here white can play h5 check and then take the rook. And I mean, there are no guarantees you are going to be able to save this position as white. There's also no guarantees you're going to be able to save this position as white. Because here it's not about taking on h4, you have to go queen f6 and correctly evaluate that this endgame is a draw, which is, I don't know how on earth you're supposed to evaluate that. Because white is just going to go like king g3 here, queen g5, like, I don't know how you're supposed to evaluate this. Knight to g5, oh my goodness. And Lingxi panics. He goes here, and now he's losing. He cannot allow the knight to stay. He just couldn't allow it. He needed to take the knight. He had to be brave. He had to understand that, like, okay, I don't know if that position is losing or not, but this position is definitely losing. And Mikola uses his final piece. Talk about an anime, by the way. This man has moved every piece. Black hasn't moved 4 different pieces. Mikola has used every piece in this game except the f-pawn. And now he goes f4. And this is it. The final piece of the puzzle has been utilized. He touched every piece got used. Maybe one of them got captured without moving. Anyway, he used every piece he could use. The game is now lost. It is lost because black does not have a move. Black doesn't have a move. And Mikola is now going to launch the final wave of attack against Lingxi. b6, trying to go bishop to b7. Queen e8. That's checkmate. Black has to defend against that. He can even give a check, doesn't matter, the king is going to move. He goes queen f6. Now this is no longer mate. But the second that the queen goes there, the queen goes there. And now that's mate. And if you go queen g7, knight f7 check, and the black king has no escape. So Lingxi goes queen a1 check, king to g2, and queen back to g7. And now there is no knight f7 check because he has pinned the knight to the king. But the attack continues with queen e8 back, threatening the same checkmate. The queen goes here, and now with queen h5, there is king f8 and king g7, and the king is running away. Doesn't matter. Best move. And then queen h7, and the king is hunted over here, and now the simplest way to win a game of chess, especially in a position like this, you don't have to end an attack with a checkmate. You can end an attack by incinerating your opponent's position. Queen c7. And black has a ruined pawn structure. Pieces that will just hang in all the tactics. Knight to h7 is winning the queen. Bishop h5 will always add an attacker. And you know who else is going to win this game for white? This guy. Because all white has to do is go h4, h5, h6, h7, and black just cannot stop it, which is just absurd, that black cannot prevent any of this from happening. He cannot move the bishop away from e6, he cannot move the rook at all. King g8, and the winning formula here for white, h4. The position is so dominant, you can just move your h-pawn. Black goes queen g6, queen d8 check, king g7, h5. Queen f6, check here, queen h7 here, h6. That is how we are going to win this game. There is still no mate. There's no mate. No mate. But you're going to win. Why? King e8, bishop h5, king f8, queen c7 back. The pawn is untouchable. There are checks available to you, but if you give me this check on b2, I go to h3, and then when you check me like this, I will just block. And then I go h7, and then I win. Queen c7, king g8, queen c6, queen b2 check, queen c3, queen e1, there's still maybe something, and there's no queen e8 mate, Lingxi doing his best. There's a hanging rook over here. He takes it. That rook was taken 50 moves into the game. This is hanging, queen f1 check, he blocks, queen check. You can go king h4 here for good measure. Honestly, I kind of wish he did, but Mikola doesn't allow his opponent to get anything, brings the knight back, queen c4, and the game ends not with a checkmate, but with a surgical move, queen c6. No checkmate, no queen a7, queen g7, queen c6. Forcing a trade of queens, because if queen a6, queen e8, and in this position, Lingxi resigned because he's down a knight and he's going to lose the game in short order. Folks, Mikola Bortnik managed to play this game where his opponent didn't move a rook and a bishop for 54 turns. And the way in which he won, g4 blowing up the position, then walling out the pieces, his dynamic understanding is so good. King f1, king was safe the entire game, and the second the board opened up g6, he gave away the rook. Good defending from Lingxi, bringing back the bishop to deflect the queen off of the 4th rank. Doesn't matter because we forced the king to a dark square. Everything was played perfectly. Queen f6, queen h8, he hung around in the position, and this absolutely disrespectful move, just shoving a horse in the face of the opponent, there's nothing you can do. Nothing. It's over. You had to take the knight. You had to go for it. You had to risk it. You couldn't. Game over. We anchored in the knight, and the attack began. And I love just like how this game ends, like what actually tips the balance. It's the h-pawn moving up the board. Well, that concludes the rarest 2-episode saga in this channel's history. And maybe these two will play a trilogy game one day because the score is now 1-1. That is all I have for you today. As always, there are a couple hundred copies remaining. Last call to get a signed book. Check out the link in the description. Get a ticket for the Europe tour if you live over there. I will see you in Amsterdam. I will see you in Zurich, Paris, London, Antwerp. We've recently added. And Köln, London. Shout out to these guys for putting on some banger games. And hopefully we keep following them. Hopefully Lingxi gets his IM and GM norms. Maybe Mikola can become a grandmaster too. That's all I have for you today. Get out of here.